welcome everybody here. Most of you were on the email that kind of explained that we had a kind of a change of who goes first, who goes second kind of thing. So what we're planning on doing here this morning is spending approximately about 2 hours in here from about 9 to 11. And then when we're done in here, we're going to go out to the driving range and we're going to try to do some little chip shots around the green and kind of talk about that. So when we're in here, if you have a question that's maybe more pertaining to that part of the game, we'll have you wait till we go up there. If you have a question more about something that we discuss or talk about in here, then that'd be more relevant here. We'll try to save some time for some questions in here. If we run long, then we may just go, hey, cut it off and go up to the driving range. I'll be asking him questions, and if it's something that's pertaining to what we are talking about, raise your hand, we'll call on you and we can try to expand upon that. If it's something on a completely different subject, maybe let's wait till the end or up at the driving range. So does that make sense to everybody? Then we'll come back down here for lunch. We'll be eating out on the patio and in here. And then Mr. Cook is going to do his seminar in here this afternoon. Okay. So first,
Mr. Cook, who is that? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
I don't have much of a voice anymore, so that's a good thing for most people.
So most of you, a lot of you have grown up here in San Diego, so you had a chance to follow Phil's history in San Diego. He grew up here in San Diego, so I'm going to probably not go through so much of his accolades here as much as just kind of do a chronological start to this. So Phil, could you tell us about your early junior golf here in San Diego and some influences on you?
Well, I started out when I was 8 years old at Presidio Hills. And there was some of you probably might recognize the name Alabrego. He developed a lot of young players. Mickey Wright, almost all the junior players, Mickey Wright, Billy Casper, Gene Littler, myself, Mike Riley, a little bit later, who was a national junior champion. We all mostly learned down there how to really play golf. I mean, big golf was too big for us when we were young kids, and he had a lot of junior clinics there, and he was quite an influence on most of my beginning career. One of the big things that he ever did for me is I used to wear a visor. Now I have to wear a big hat. I've been in the trees so much that I don't get the sun anymore. I carry an umbrella around my head. But anyway, he put a pencil on my visor. And he said, I don't ever want you to move that pencil off of the ball. So you point that pencil right at the ball and you keep it there. You hit the ball, you come up, you hold your finish, then you look up and you see your pencil be pointing right at the ball there. That was the big thing that he ever taught me, was to keep my head straight. Still. And I was watching the baseball game last night. I'm probably one of the few people that watched the Padres. But anyway, Dick Edberg came up with a line that really struck a chord with me. He said, they call him the professor, and he went to the University of Michigan. And he said that one of the things that he learned in Michigan when he went he took the physics class or something like that, and that wherever the head went, the body went. He said, if you move your head around, you see your body will go wherever your head goes. So if you keep your head still, and you'll do really well. And several years ago, in 1980, I was working with Chuck Cook in Austin at the hills of Lakeway, and we got involved with a man by the name of Dr. Ralph Mann. And he was a biomechanics expert at University of Kentucky. He was the last white man to ever beat Haven Moses. And he started studying track and field and horses because he was in Kentucky, and then he got interested in golf. And he brought some film out of what was the sprinter's name? I can't remember his name right now. Carl Lewis. And he, Carl Lewis at that time was the fastest man in the world in 100 yards. And he put a laser on his shoulders, on his head, and on all his hips. They were in a straight line. They never moved. They never had any excess movement. And he said that's how you become efficient. The more you do that, the more you keep those there. The only thing that moved was his legs and his arms. And everything else just stayed dead flat, never wavered. And so we started doing golf, and we found out that the people that were, there's Mr. Cook right there.
Welcome.
Me.
Where you been, son?
What are you talking about? What happened to all this, you know?
Huh?
What? What do you mean, what?
Went by the wayside. But anyway, Chuck and I started working with Ralph Mann, and he developed a swing off of about 50 tour players, all shapes and sizes. And he developed a model swing. And the model swing was built on mostly efficiency, where you put your body in the most dynamic position that you can. And we found out a couple of things about, because the clubs were all basically the same length and all the same weight, you didn't have a specific body weight, body size, and everything didn't measure out. We measured, 40 points on your body. And you had to bend your body into fitting the club. So, because the club was more or less the standard thing. When we first came out with a way to fool around with golf clubs, and we ended up going 4 inches over and 4 inches up, depending on the size. If you were a little short lady like that, you needed a really short club, and if you were a long guy, you needed long clubs. But now the thing that we've gone into now is, and what I believe in very strongly, is I don't think that there's a necessary way to do it, but what I try to do is I try to get everybody to go into develop the most efficient swing that we can, where everything is on balance. And that starts with the body, and it goes outside, progressively out to the face of the club, where you learn to control the face. But the thing that I noticed when I was playing is that I was taught that's I used the pencil that made my body stationary, and then my arms and my body would work, and it was easy for me to lay the face on the ball. And a few years later, Chuck Courtney was part of our little deal at La Jolla with Paul Runyon, and Gene Lilla was there, and he said, and he was kind of my idol, Chuck's a little bit, But you know, he would, what he basically tried to do, I said, all I need to do is I just need to lay the face on the ball every time. He says, that's my goal. He says, if I can lay the face on it every time, I'm never going to hit a poor shot. And you watch these guys today, they're totally different than we were when we changed. Because most of the golfers in my time were under 6 feet. If you were over 6 feet, you were a freak. Tom Weiskopf or George Bear or George Archer. George Archer was 6 feet. George Bear was like 6'5" or 6. And Weiskopf was 6'3", and he was really a freak. Now, almost everybody in the game now is over 6 feet. And the average guy is about 6'2" or 6'3". So what that's done is that's made its major change in the clubs. The clubs have gone longer to account for that, and the swings have changed because the person is the shorter you were, the more horizontal you swung, and the taller you were, the more vertically you swung. And the players today swing a lot more vertically. The pitch of their swing is totally different than when we played. But we were still taught, I was still taught by starting with Mr. Abrego, and then I got to play with Ralph Goldall down there, and he came down and played with his son. And he was a major champion, and I probably had in my time, I don't know, I was talking to Sean about it the other day, I think 11 or 12 major champions in golf have an influence in my career by the time I was 18 years old. And there's not very many people that have that opportunity to learn from those people. They all had little different things, and I got something from every single one of those players because of that. And being around those, Ed Fergal won the 54 Open at Balderstrom. He showed me how to hit a shot out of the rough without hitting a jumper or a flyer, which you watch today, these guys just grip it as hard as they can and try to slash it out of the grass because it's so long. But like this year at the Players' Championship, they cut the grass down to about 2 inches, and they were hitting jumpers all over. But as I got older, and I learned, and I started fooling around. This a long time later, when I was ending my career, and Nicholas was still playing, and I went down to his house and spent a few weeks with him. Started out for a couple of days, and I ended up staying almost 3 weeks, and I couldn't afford to leave. It was like a mobile 7-star hotel. It had 4 boats, and swimming pool, 3 tennis courts, and food orchard, everything you can imagine. Golf green. It's a tough life. Somebody had to do it though. But anyway, we went out and he went over and said, I want to hit some balls out of the rough. And he was practicing my flyers. So he practiced his flyers. And he got some that he figured out that he could fly it just about 30 yards down farther every time from the rough than he could through the fairway. So that was part of the game that he exceeded in. But he was really strong out of the long grass, the way he swung the club. But it was basically no different than the things that I learned is when I was like 13 years old. I got to watch and follow Sam Snead around. And he said, come on, son, let's go. He did a little differently than that. But he was pretty good. He didn't talk too badly. But he told me, he said, this was the time when they had the big thing about the Ben Hogan and the five fundamentals of golf and all that. He says, said, you never want to do that. He says, your swing goes up and down, then you get underneath, and then you hit underneath the ball. He says, you hit underneath the ball, you lift the ball. He says, you don't hit down on it, you come down, you swing underneath it, then you come back up. And he was probably as fine an iron player as I ever saw. I mean, he wanted to be pin high every single time. But I got to play a lot of golf with him. I got to play, watch with Byron Nelson, play with Byron Nelson when I went to college. And you know, it was just a lot of things that I had the opportunity to learn that most people don't. I don't know, maybe Butch Harmon, because of his father, knew as many of those players and got to get the information. But I felt like I was one of the most fortunate people that I ever knew. And then I ended up with Paul Runyon when I was 15, I think. And he never really did anything to our, like Chuck and swings. He didn't do that much. He just harped on our grip a lot. Made sure that your grip was in what he called a neutral position. And because at that time, you know, I was trying to emulate a little bit of what Hogan said, where I had the weak left and the right up on the top. He says, you don't want to be there. So he said, you don't have as flat a swing as Ben Hogan did. You got a more upright swing. You needed more neutral grip. And he never really did too much. He just more or less taught Chuck and I how to play, how to score. And he would take us out. I know he took me out a lot. I don't know about Chuck that much, but he took you out quite a bit to play. And we would basically play blindfolded, where he would tell us exactly what we were supposed to do, why we were supposed to do it, and how we were going to do it on every shot. And I think every time that he did that, the highest score I ever shot, we used to play 9 holes in about 50 minutes. I was exhausted. He was ready to go, though. He wanted to go some more. We used to jog around the golf course all the time. But I don't think I ever shot anything other than 2 or 3 under par at the highest. With him teaching, him saying it. So what I found out later, and I didn't get married till my later life, my wife was over there, and I learned how to take orders real well. And so if I did the things that if we did the things that he told us, we would do extremely, well all the time. We would take advantage. He was a person that was not long. He felt like he needed to take an advantage of all the situations that he could. I mean, if the fairway sloped a little left, from right to left, he'd say, you got to hit it down the right side of the fairway, and ride the fairway down into playable position, because you're going to get a little bit more distance, you get a little more roll. Same way if it went left or right. But then if you want to play an iron shot, then you want to go into the hill so that you get control of the ball. But he also taught us so much about chipping and putting. I mean, his chipping style and his pitching style was totally different than most anybody. But even in his very later years, when he was in his 70s, he could still beat virtually anybody in the game. Any touring pro, and most of the shots that he'd get in the bunker, and he'd do things in the bunker that would absolutely amaze you. He had chips out, chips and pitches. He had a little different philosophy, but his idea was, he said, and I always thought that this was interesting too. He said, if there's something wrong with you, you need to go to a specialist. find out what a specialist is. You know, what he says. Says you just don't go to somebody. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is that when I played with a lot of these other pros, they would tell you what they did. They didn't tell you what you were supposed to do. And Rodgers would tell you what you were supposed to do. He didn't tell you. He didn't ever tell you what he was doing. You know, he wanted to do it the correct way all the time. I mean, he was a fanatic. I can tell you a story about him that I first started with Chuck. That was with Golf Digest, and a couple of the people from Golf Digest wrote, you know, for the magazine, wrote articles. They said that every article that Paul Rodgers ever wrote, he wrote it out longhand, and they never had to make a correction but one time, and probably 50 times. That's how grammatically correct it was, and he only had an 8th grade education. But he was so oriented in the finer parts of what was going on and understood how to do it. And he was really great at explaining it to us too. And a lot of times it would be a little bit too complicated. Try to simplify it as much as I could. When I go out there, I try to speak in one syllable, 4 or 5 letter words. I can't even enunciate some of these words that he would use. But the other thing that he taught me, and this became quite prominent in my teaching, is that you need to find out what that person thinks, how he thinks, what does he do? Is he an engineer? Is he an accountant? Is he, you know, a doctor or whatever? And you need to be able to relate to him. You said, never have to have the student relate to you. You want to be able to relate to that student. So you have to learn how to communicate basically the same thing in 40, 50 different ways because of the personalities. And he said, and this is one thing that I also used in my teaching part of it, especially in chipping. He said that women will chip a lot better than men for the most part because they want to grab it and muscle it, and they tense up and all that. He said women are used to rocking kids. They rock kids to sleep. That's what you want to get if you're chipping and putting stroke, is get a rocking type motion. So a lot of them are a lot better. They'll learn a lot better. They'll be better once they grasp that idea. So that's pretty much what, you know, that's going through my history in golf. And also the guy that's in the back over there had a big influence in my career. He saved me from destroying too many people. We used to do golf schools. We used to punish these people. We started 5 days. And we'd hit balls. They'd hit balls. They'd never have a never-ending pile of balls. And they'd all come in there. The first thing we'd hand them was a box of Band-Aids. They did ball after ball after ball. So and they were either ready to quit or they could play at the end of the school. But we had a lot of fun with it. I'd be the heavyweight. Chuck would be the guy that would break everybody up. So you'll find that out this afternoon, I think. I don't think he's lost his personality yet. Doesn't look like it anyway.
Don't tell some of the stories.
Huh?
Don't tell most of the stories.
Well, I can't tell.
No, don't tell them, please.
So
That would not be good if I told
No.
all the stories.
No, they kick us out of here.
So anyway, Sean's got some questions, and
yeah.
you all can interject anytime you want.
So you kind of talked about running, and then you transitioned into, you went off to University of Houston. Tell us about what it was like the first going to college, and then the first couple of years on tour. Tell us about that.
Well, Houston was a private school, and we actually had a pretty good golf team. We won the NC2A about, 11 times, something like that, in the 50s and 60s. Started out with a man by the name of, guy by the name of Rex Baxter. And we had a team. We had our coach was Dave Williams, and he knew absolutely nothing about golf. And he was a recruiter, and he recruited for the football team and the basketball team. They were trying to get us down. They had a pretty good football team, but he was kind of a motivator type person. But he got some really good players. We had Jackie Cupid, and Jim Hiskey, Babe Hiskey, Carlos Harley, Homero Blancas, Fred Marty, Richard Crawford. All those guys won NC2A championships. I won the only one I played in 58.
So as a freshman, the rules in the NCAA back then were you couldn't play as a freshman. So you had to sit out a year before you played, and then the sophomore year, you won the NCAA title. Did you really win every college tournament that year, or did you lose one?
Well, I won every tournament I played in college. I was the only
Can you believe that?
most of them.
But he made more money freshman year gambling on the side than he could when he played in the college tournament. So then you go off to the tour, and there's actually a military service in there as well.
Yes, but Houston was a private school, and they didn't have much. They didn't have any money, and they called us in there when I was a sophomore, when I was a junior, and they said we're going to have to disband the golf team. We can't go to any tournaments or anything like that. And we don't have any money. You have to pay your own expenses. Well, I didn't have any. I didn't have any money. My family didn't have any money, and I actually had a benefactor from La Jolla who was more or less sponsoring me, and also a man that owned Golfcraft in Escondido. His name was Ted Woolley, and he sponsored. He took care of me with golf equipment, which was illegal in those days. All the equipment that I ever needed. But I went Jackie Cupid and another boy and myself, David Boyce. We were going to go to the Mexican Amateur down in Monterey, and David had a brand new Chrysler 300 that was really flying. So we got in there, and we didn't tell anybody that we were leaving. We left at like 3 in the morning. And we left, and we missed school one day, and they found out that we missed school, and they went to Coach Williams, and Coach Williams said, he investigated, he couldn't find any of us. And finally somebody gave away the beans and said, well, they're on their way down to the Mexican Amateur. So he sent the Texas Highway Patrol after us. They picked us up 20 miles from the Mexican border. Stopped us, and just turn around and come back. He never let us forget that either. Well, we were on probation forever. But when it came to a tournament, he needed us, so we still got to play. But anyway, we, Jackie Cupid was a heck of a good player. He won a lot of, he won several tournaments. Homero broke the scoring record with 55. We had some guys that could really, really play. And it's a little bit different now. These golf companies, they give you all kinds of stuff when you're 10 years old. You get outfitted, you get balls, gloves, clothes, anything you want. So, but I never had a chance to make the Walker Cup team because Joe Dye, I talked to Joe Dye about it one time, and he said, "Why I can't put you on a Walker Cup team because you're a non-amateur. You're not a pro, but you're a non-amateur. Because we know that they're helping you go to these tournaments, and with the equipment and stuff like that, we just can't do that because that's against the rules. So now the rules have totally changed. So when they told me that I wasn't going to be able to play golf in Houston, I was on the airplane in about 2 hours, went back home, and at that time you had to do either 6 months reserve duty in the military or 2 years of active duty, and then you could go into non-active reserves. So I decided that I wanted to go into the Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps had a really good athletic program. They had a football team and several tennis players. They had Dennis Ralston and some really big time tennis players. And they just represented the Marine Corps in these tournaments. And they said, well, you can do this in golf. And there was an admiral in Coronado where we used to play over there with John Rudy and Don Collette and all those guys. And he decided that he didn't like me very well, and so he called the admiral or the general at MCRD and said, "You can't do this. You can't do this anymore. You have to go through boot camp." So I was there. I had qualified for the U.S. Open, and I was going to the U.S. Open in Wingfoot in 1959. And so they said, well, you can't come in the Marine Corps until after you play in the Open. So so I went in there and I went through boot camp, and then we played I played on the Marine golf team after that, and I won the All-Marine and the All-Service. I played against a guy by the name of Orville Moody, who was, he won the U.S. Open, a very good player. He said, who is this guy? So, but anyway, we got to be pretty good. We got to be pretty good friends, and then at that time, you had to serve an apprenticeship at the PGA before you could win money. You had to serve a 6-month apprenticeship before you could get a card. So I turned pro while I was in the Marine Corps, and I went down to Palm Desert to play in the Southern California Open, and had a really good field. I had Eric Mott Monty and Lloyd Banker, the really top players from Southern California section. I ended up losing a playoff there at Monty on the second hole, and I got a telegram from my then general at FCRD saying, report back to your duty station. And so I went back there, and he said, I'm shipping you overseas. And I said, what? Why is this? He said, because you didn't tell me that I was turning pro, or that you were turning pro, and I don't think that that's right to be playing on Marine Corps time and being a pro and winning money. So I managed to waggle myself out of that, and I ended up getting transferred down to Yuma. And 6 months down in Yuma, and I went down and checked in with my father over the Christmas holiday, Christmas and New Year's holidays. And I went down there, and we ran into a man by the name of Sergeant Beverly, and he was on the All-Marine golf team, a good player, and he was the assistant to the commander of the base. And he said, we heard somebody like by that name, and I didn't know it was you or not. So I checked in my clubs at Yuma Country Club, and we went over there, and he took me in, and the commander of the base was a man by Lieutenant Commander, he was Commander Mock. And it turns out that my father and I had played golf with Commander Mock several times at Balboa Park. And he said, and he knew us both pretty well, and he said, I think you should, there's no reason to put you in there. I'm going to put you in special services. And you go home for the rest of the holidays and report back in. He comes back in, and then they gave me, he said, okay, you can play in San Diego, you can play in San Francisco, you can play in Phoenix, you can play in all those tournaments you're going to go TAD. And which was totally the opposite of what the general at FCRD was. So I went back down I went to see a friend of mine down in the base, and the general drove up and he saw me there, and he absolutely had a cow. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't do anything. And then he saw my name in the paper playing in all these tournaments, and then so I couldn't win any money, but I got a lot of experience because of that situation. So I owed a lot to him, to Commander Mock, and as far as furthering my career. And then by doing the 6 month, when I got out of the Marine Corps at the end of June, I drove right to St. Paul, and I could win money. So my first tournament was in St. Paul, Minnesota, St. Paul Open. And by the way, Chuck won that tournament. What year did you win it?
64.
64. That was at Keller Park, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in those days, we played a lot of municipal courses on the tour, but that was more or less the start of my career. I had a few chances to win right off the bat. I won 3 out of my first 16 tournaments. And that was the last of that. I needed to work back at the caddy field.
Hey, Phil, tell them the story about you and Nicholas Pinehurst, the U.S. Amateur.
Pinehurst?
I think it was Pinehurst, wasn't it?
U.S. Amateur with Nicholas.
Oh, no, that was at St. Louis Country Club.
Huh?
That was at St. Louis Country Club.
Okay.
Well, we played in the third round, played a match in the third round, and it was kind of a tournament between Dean Beeman and Jack and myself were kind of the three favorites. And Jack and I played the third round, and the night before the match, it was a morning match, and Charlie Nicholas, Jack's father, told Jack that I got up on top of the clubhouse roof and said that I was taking him down and Jack was going to fall.
Yelling at the top of his voice.
Yeah.
I want that.
Yeah,
I want that.
that's not true. I never saw the roof of cloud. I don't like heights. So, that was obviously not true.
He was Muhammad Ali before Muhammad Ali.
But anyway, I shot 2 under par. I shot the second lowest round in the entire tournament, and I lost 6 and 4. And Charlie Nicholas came up to me. He said, "I'm sorry, Phil. You know, I don't know. He just ran into a buzzsaw today." I said, "Yeah, Charlie. Yeah, I know all about it." You know. So anyway, he ended up. He went out and played a guy by the name of Charles Lewis from Arkansas the next round. And he shot 29 on me the first 9, and he shot 41 with Charles Nicholas. Charlie Lewis lost 3 and 2 or something like that to Charlie, and that was when he wrote it in his book. He said, "That's when I learned to not put all my eggs in one basket." He said, "I thought all I wanted to do was beat Phil, and the tournament was over." He said, "I found out differently." So, but that's the extent of my career with him. I mean, you know, I was leading the British Open in Muirfield by 2 shots, and he was second. And we were in the last group in a twosome, and we both teed off. And we walked off the tee. Those days the tee was a little bit smaller than this floor right here, and I almost stumbled off the tee. And he looked at me with those steely blue eyes, and he said, "If I don't win this tournament," he says, "I want you to win it." I said, "Well, thank you, Jack." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I don't want the guy in front of us to win." He was talking about Palmer. So anyway, I said, "Jack, you really want to win this tournament?" "Yeah, I really do." I said, "Okay, well, I'll let you win it." You know, so it's just like, I mean, you built Muirfield in Ohio, you know, you get everything, you know, after that, because that's the tournament that he wanted the most. But anyway, the interesting story about that is that we got to finished the last hole, and I congratulated him and handed him his scorecard. And he said, "Phil," he said, "we have a little problem here." And I said, "What's that, Jack?" And I looked at my card, and he didn't have a score on my scorecard. He didn't even know I was there from the time I walked off the first tee. That's the kind of state that he could put himself in. It was unbelievable. Now, they changed the rule after that to where they now had a marker, where the marker kept the score, and so I had a little doubt, but I could have won that tournament. I could have just said that. No, I just had a 6 there. I had a 4. He wouldn't have known.
So early in your career, you played some rounds with Ben Hogan. tell us about some of those experiences, or maybe about his game?
Well, I actually played with Ben Hogan in the last. I was paired with him in the first 2 rounds of the last Open Championship that he played, which was at Baltimore in '67. And I played with him several times before, and you know, a lot of people were really kind of afraid of him, and he was not a man of a lot of words. You know, he would say 2 or 3 words and it would make a big impact on you. But I played at Augusta with him several times, and we played a match with Dal Fitzgerald and Dean Beeman. And the rule was that Hogan would come out and hit balls in the morning at like 10 o'clock, hit balls till 11:30, and then go have lunch, and we had an absolute tea time. It was 12:15 every day. And you go right to the first tee, and that tee was blocked. He had the tee. That was his time. And so we did that the first day, and we played, and he hit like 17 greens and putted terrible, and I played pretty well, but we still lost. We lost $10 to those guys, and so we paid them off. And I said, Ben, I said, we would need a rematch. I said, we can take these guys down. I'll never play with them again. So they had 28 putts. Beeman had 23 putts, and Fitzgerald had 25 in the round. And he said, I can't do it. I'm not playing with him. So I let him stew around for another couple hours. He went out and hit some balls, and finally I went over to him and I said, Ben, I said, I don't know about you, but I said, I want to get my money back. So I really think that we should play him again. He said, are you sure you really want to? And I said, yes. He said, okay, I'll do it. So we went out the next day, we went through the same routine, and we took it for $15. So we had a little profit for the 2 days. I'll tell you a little story about Steve when I was an amateur there in Augusta. And he used to play with all the amateurs because he liked to intimidate. He intimidated everybody. You know, he would talk to you. He would move his club around, do different things, just see how much he could distract you. And if he won, he would stand right on the back of the last hole, and he'd have his hand out like this, and he'd say, "Come on, boys, hit the hip. Fast pay makes fast friends." So we played one day, and I beat him. I beat him at $15, and he stormed off the green, and he was in there having lunch, and he was in a round table with Herbert Warren and some of the really heavyweight golf writers in the business for the New York Times and the Chicago paper, Lincoln Ward and several of those guys. Bill Drum was there too, and you know, he's always, the press guys like to follow around because he'd always have these stories. So I went up to him and he said, I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, Sam, I said, you forgot to pay me. Don't be going in there like this. And then those guys started ragging on him so bad, it was unbelievable. Sam, you better pay that boy right now. Otherwise, you're really going to hear about it. And after that, we were the best of friends. You know, I stood up to him. And that's basically what you had to do. He was, you know, once you did that, he would take a liking to you. He always said hi, he always spoke, and he was a very, very nice person for the most part. But he definitely wanted the edge.
What about one of our local legends, Billy Casper?
Well, Billy Casper and Gene Liller were the hot item around San Diego, and up north it was Harvey Ward and Ken Venturi, and it was mostly between Liller and Venturi and Harvey Ward for the California. But Casper was not a very good player. Paul Runyon told him, he said, "I think you'd be much better off to go get a job." That's the only mistake that I think that man ever made. But he learned how to play, and obviously became one of the top players ever in the history of golf. Magnificent putter, but he was a unique player because he played ground golf. He played a lot like the European players, and the players from the rest of the world that played the small ball, where he didn't carry it. He rolled the ball on the green. He had a low hook in there, and he learned how to hit the ball up in the air. I'd have to say that some of the very best players on the tour, probably at least 3 out of 5, maybe 4 out of 5, of the best players in the world have been ground ball hitters and learned how to hit the ball up in the air. Nicklaus was the only guy that hit the ball up and learned how to hit it down. Casper hit it on the ground, Palmer hit it on the ground, Trevino hit it on the ground, Gary Player hit it on the ground. They all learned to hit the ball up in the air. And when he did that, he had such great control of his wedge. He was unbelievable. He was a fabulous wedge player. Chuck worked a lot with the very fine player Tom Kite. And Tom Kite is not a great athlete by any way, shape, or form. I mean, you look at, he's exactly the opposite of somebody like a Greg Norman, who was a fabulous athlete. So was Sam Snead. But Chuck would tell you that, Kite was an extremely hard worker. But when he'd go out there and practice wedges, he'd practice wedges at yardages like most people practice, maybe in 10-yard increments. He'd practice in 5-yard increments. And he was so good at putting it up there, he only had to learn 2 shots. But he was so good and had such good touch that he only played the way he knew how to play, what he could do. And that's what, he was the younger Billy Casper, where, like Trevino could play all kinds of shots. Well, Tom and Billy Casper didn't play hardly any different shots. They played the same shot, but they never deviated from that shot. Casper was a unique person because he built his clubs in kind of a special way. He built a driver that he couldn't hook, and he built a 3-wood that he hooked. So when he had a dog leg to the right, he took his driver out. He had a dog leg to the left, or he wanted to hook it, he took his 3-wood out. And the ball did what it was supposed to do every time, the same swing. Different shot because of the way the clubs were. When Billy got in his later career on the regular tour to where he couldn't break 80. Yeah, a mutual friend of ours by the name of Frank Verna, who played in a band in San Diego, all over. A lot of us used to go follow him around and wherever they played. And he was a pretty nice golfer. He was a good friend of Billy's, and he called me up. He said, "You got to work with with Billy. So we met over at Coronado and we went out and worked and we totally changed his ball flat around. He was trying to hit high fades, and I said we're not going to do that. We're going to go back to this other way. Well, he ended up that he won like 25 senior tournaments at that point. And so, but you know, there's one thing that I can say about playing golf and being a teacher. When Rodgers was our coach, he was never the star. The player was the star. Chuck and I were the star. Lily was the star. When we went out and I started teaching, you know, I tried to maintain it. I don't believe that the coach should ever be the star. I have a very hard time with a lot of these so-called coaches. Now I call them prancers. They prance up and down the practice team. You know, yeah, you see me, yeah, oh yeah, I'm working with this guy, I'm working with this guy, I'm working with this guy. I don't, you know, it's always the player. Claude Harmon Sr. made a great statement to Butch one time. He said, Butch, he said, don't ever get the big head about teaching these guys thinking you're really good, because these guys were all good before you started working with them. Now, those two comments have always stuck with me. And I think that if you saw the same thing with Chuck would be the same way. You know, now we might have little contests every now and then just to see who, you know, see. You know, we used to have a few games every now and then, but just to keep it tuned up. It's just like when we go out there with Rodgers, he'd take our money all the time. He hated to lose. I have one story about Rodgers, and then I'll quit talking about this. We were in La Jolla, and we used to have a group of guys that we played, and we used to, after the round, we'd go play 5 holes. We played 1, 2, 3, 8, and 9 at La Jolla, which is now 9 and 10. And 2, the break, then do 2 was there. And we used to play with one club, and I used to play with a 5-iron. And, you know, you could put a little grass around the ball and hit a shooter, and I could hit a 5-iron about 210, 220. Yeah, you know, I could shoot par with a 5-iron. And so the guys decided that they weren't going to play. We weren't going to play that game, or I couldn't play their game anymore. So I said, well, I'll play with the wedge. So I played with the sandwich, and I could belly a sandwich. I could play with a solid ball, but I could belly a sandwich about 175 or 180 yards. So it was a little fair game. But anyway, so I still was beating these guys with my wedges. So these guys went to Paul, and they said, Paul, what club would you play if you had one club to play? He said, I played with a 4-wood. And I said, well, we want you to play Phil. We're back in Philly. You know, we want you to play him with one club. And he's going to use a wedge. And he said, we can do that. So there was quite a bit of money bet on this game. And I went up to the golf craft, and I took a sand wedge, and I put a 37 or 8 inch shaft in it. And I ground off the front edge so it was flat. And then on holes I had like 4 degrees of loft, it was just like a putter. And I can feel that thing. So, anyway, we went out and played, and it had to be 5 holes in succession. We played 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And anyway, I made when they hit it down the bottom of the hill, they couldn't get it up out of the hill. I hit it in the bunker, made a double bogey on the first hole, and I was just kind of cruising. I was making bogeys all the way around, and I holed about a 25-footer on the last hole. He beat him by 2 shots, and he was so upset. He wanted to play again, and I said, "No," I said, "I'm sorry." I said, "You get out the way you got in. We're done. You know, I'm not going to do this anymore." He didn't speak to me for a year.
So when I, before I worked here at the Grand, I worked at La Jolla Country Club for 9.5 years. And in the pro shop as an assistant pro, spending a lot of time in the golf shop, I probably had 4 or 5 members that actually witnessed that match, that told me the story of the match before ever Phil told me the story of the match. So that was kind of cool about working at La Jolla. That's how I met Phil about almost 20 years ago. So I had heard about that match, and I heard about how upset Runyon was after losing. So let's switch gears here. Ideally, we'll talk a little bit more about the golf swing later. Let's talk about your involvement with Cobra Golf, and you designed wedges. Let's go into a little bit more about the club side of the business. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, I learned when I was growing up, my father was kind of a tinkerer, and we were always working on clubs, and I was of the opinion that I had been told by Paul that you need to learn about your equipment, and so I became very interested in it, and I learned how to make my own clubs. I personally worked on every club that I ever made. I used to get 10 sets of irons at a time. And I go through all those 10 sets and I pick out one set that was perfect. In those days they didn't have all the tight specifications that they have now, and they were all forged in ground, and the shafts weren't as consistent necessarily, and they didn't have S400, 300, and you put shafts in there, and it took 10 sets to get it right. And so I've always been very interested in my clubs, and I've built them, and I learned how to build a club out of a block of wood, how to build a driver completely, chisel the insert out, try to polish it, spin the hosel, doing all those things. I was very, very fascinated by it. That was my major in college in woodworking. And that's because I was trying to get out of the woods all the time. But anyway, so I've always been very intrigued by golf clubs and the design of clubs and how they work and why they work. And I even got, I used to work on tour players' clubs for them. I would face them, and I got Ray Floyd. I got him to take his, because he had a very poundy swing where he's very upright, hit the ground and hit a lot of shooters. So you're playing with the wrong shafts, and I kind of to take some dynamic X shafts, and they dipped them 1.5 inches to get them stiff enough. And then all of a sudden he started winning because he never hit these flyers. He became an extremely good iron player. And it's basically the same thing with Nicholas, where I got him, he was getting 10 cents a clubs a year. We were expensive for our manufacturers. But I've always been very, very interested in that. And in 1977, I was kind of on the way out as a player, and Gary Bazance, who had just taken over cover from Tom Crow, along with Tom Crow, said, I want you to come and work for me. And so I did. We started out selling clubs. And I used to grind wedges for players in the back room, and there were in the little Cobra plant down in Serrano Valley. And pretty soon we started making wedges, and we actually were the more or less the inventor. I don't know if you could be an inventor or not, but we were the inventor of the 3-wedge system. And now these guys use 4 wedges. Most of these guys have 4 wedges. But a lot of players have 4 wedges. Of course, the pitching wedge is like an 8-iron, which in our time. Loft-wise, strength-wise. But I got into making those. I actually designed a driver. I built a driver for Hale Irwin and Steve. So when they opened it in 90.
Steve Jones.
Steve Jones. They won 3 opens with the driver that I built and designed. And so it's been mostly into wedges. I developed wedges at one time. You know, we developed a Trusty Rusty and stuff like that. But actually, the reason that the Trusty Rusty came about was because of Ed Steed. And we made Ed Steed some wedges, and he said, "Don't chrome them. I want them to rust." He said, "I can get a better grip on the ball." And I said, "Well, it's going to wear out faster." He said, "No, I like the rust look." So that ended up being a big seller in the 80s and early 90s. Was the Rusty, and then came the Trusty Rusty and some other stuff. But that's always fascinated me. And the thing that was really fun for me was working with the CAD operators and drawing lines and pictures, and learning. When we originally did the way the design was, the weight was pretty much set, and the center of gravity and all that. You just couldn't vary it very much. Well, as we went along in doing this, we learned that you could move the center of gravity around the higher, low, and inside, around, do all those kind of things. It was really a great experience. It kept me stimulated. I used to sit there thinking at night in bed, thinking about what I was going to do outside. It's been a great. It was a great run for me to be able to do that and to be fairly successful at it, but most of all to continue to learn about how things are going, learn about the different materials. And now, you know, there's so much that can be done as far as materials and textures and things like that. I mean, one of the interesting things is that when I first built the trusty, we had square grooves were in. Then when we built the trusty, we put V grooves in. And the players were complaining that the ball was moving on the club face. It was rolling on the club face. It wasn't sticking. So we had to go in there and we put square grooves back in. Now, the USGA took the square grooves away, so now we had to figure out a way to make the grooves so you could do it. Actually, the players are much better today with V grooves than they ever were with square grooves. With the square grooves, you're pretty much limited to what you can do, and now you're a lot more versatile, and you have more control and more variance with the V grooves. And the USGA probably is realizing that wasn't necessarily the reason that people were doing it, except hitting the ball out of the rough. The way that they've designed the covers on the ball, things like that, how you build how you do the face and the grooves to match. And I designed different soles and why some soles work for some people and some don't work for other people. We'll go over that some over here when we go outside. I have like 3 different wedges with 3 different soles. I'll show you the pluses and the minuses of each one of them. But my little trademark is this cutout here on the back. And one of the things that I feel is very, very strongly about it in the wedge, and I believe through the training of running, is that bounce is your friend. And he liked a lot of bounce, but he liked a very narrow flange. So we made I used that, built this cutout. Actually, the thing that happens when you put bounce on the club, it moves the leading edge up and down, so it gets too high or too tight. If you don't have any bounce, it digs too much. If it sits too high and you hit the ground, you played it. So I decided to move this cutout back and forth, getting closer to the front and out and back. It allowed to control the height of the leading edge off the ground. In other words, where this club sits 225 thousandths off of the ground with the leading edge. And if you go out and you get some of these wedges, some of them are up to almost 300. Well, it's almost impossible to play with those unless you have a lot of grass. The cushions on the fairways have changed so much where there's, the fairways at the TPC championship were cut at a quarter inch, but we used to play 3/4 inch was short. They built the fairways 3 times a week. They didn't go 2 times a day. So you have to be able to match the club to the surface. If you go to bed grass, you've got to have a different flange. Bermuda grass, a different flange. Bed grass, a different flange. You have to have a different approach to the ball in order to be, effective. So those are just some of the things that the club. I'm actually very fortunate because I've had 3 careers out of 1 career. A player or a semi-player anyway, and club designer and a teacher. That's basically all I know.
So Phil, I know we're going to go out there and talk about short game, but I've watched you teach full swing for years, and you have a pretty, I would call a model of way the club needs to work in a golf swing to give the best chance of the club working for you instead of the club working against you. Can you talk a little bit about the full swing?
Well, actually, the full swing is, the short game is just a smaller, easier, slower version, shorter version of the full swing. And like I said earlier, there's a sequence which I think is very important. Number one is to get the body in as much a position of strength and balance and control as possible. And then that will have some influence on your arm swing, and then you might have to work a little bit on your arm swing to get what you're trying to accomplish. But a lot of they have a tendency to fix a percentage as you go away, and the last thing that you go through is I try to teach a lot with the shaft and not very much with the club face. In other words, I try to establish a pattern of consistency. If a person slices and hooks and tops it and all that, I try to get them to get as close as they can to a one-way ball flight, whatever it is. It's a slice every time, or a fade, or a straight ball, or a draw, or whatever. And then you make your adjustments with your grip and your club face last. Most people tend to work with the grip first. If the grip and the club face are basically in control, but it's like to me, the best player on the tour right now, tee to green, as far as I'm concerned, far away, is Dustin Johnson. Dustin Johnson plays different than almost anybody on the tour. He plays with a strong grip and a closed club face. But he hits the ball so solid, so straight. And he's terrible. He's terrible. The closer he gets to the hole, the worse he is. One of these days, these guys are hoping that he doesn't ever learn how to play. Excuse me. I'm losing my voice here for a second.
So what do you like about Dustin Johnson's swing?
That's very much on a straight line towards the target. It doesn't swing in to out, doesn't swing out to in. He swings on a very nice, what I call pitch. It's not a plane. The plane is an 8 octave, but every golf club has a different pitch depending on the length of the loft. Your short irons are much more upright. Your drivers much flatter. Your driver swing is somewhere around 45 to 50, and your irons are working their way up. It's like the new young boy Shambo. He felt like he swung the best with a 7-iron, so he made all his irons a 7-iron. He's got 70 degrees of line. That's extremely upright. I mean, most of the clubs are in the low 60s. 64 being the most upright with a wedge, down to about 59. But he swings a lot like a Mo Norman stack ball, something like a pyramid. That's what you say, look at that, let's get him top of the other, they can stack them up like that. He had a machine out there where he pushed those balls. He was pretty good. He was a good ball hitter. So there's different ways to do it, but when Bowen Harmon swung, he swung in a parallel line to the target on a pitch. And like you use the oleo, which we'll might talk about out here. Excuse me. But Dustin Johnson, the club face and club path stay on the ball for at least 50% longer than any other player out there. His club face is on the target line for that long. At least a foot behind it, at least 6 inches past it. And it's like, you know, Jason Day is winning a lot here. Jason Day is winning with his short game and his putting and the length of his drives. The length that he drives the ball. But he's not hitting the ball very close to the hole. And I think, you know, Jordan Spieth doesn't put his club enough on the target line, so he has a double miss. He has a right miss and a left miss. I'm surprised that because a couple of years ago, I don't think that he was as far from the inside out as he is right now. Jason Day has a pretty straight path, but I don't know how you could be that violent and be around very long. That's the same thing with Tiger. I'm not sure the Tigers are. But Tiger used to have a very, very parallel swing to the target. His club was totally balanced. I mean, I don't care how strong you are. Tiger Woods and Jason Day are two of the stronger people. So is Dustin Johnson. But if that club weighs a pound, you swing it 100 miles an hour, it's a 100-pound weight. You don't guide it, it guides you. So you need to start and get it going in the right direction so you can utilize your body in a way so that you have as much control as possible as you can. But if I was going to make it, if I was going to toss something to you, where would I swing my hand? Right back toward you like that. I wouldn't be going over here, throw over there. I'd be going right back and forth. And to me, that's simplistic, but it entails more than that. But that's effectively what you're trying to do, is to get that thing to match up. And when you make a practice swing, and a practice swing looks pretty, but the ball isn't there. If you put the ball where there and you make the same practice swing, you're probably not going to hit the ball straight, but you probably miss the ball. And you don't want to do that because you'll embarrass everybody. You'll be embarrassed in front of everybody if you miss it. You got to hit the ball. So you do everything you can to make adjustments to do it. So that's basically my philosophy on it. I like to work from the inside out. If you have a player that's good with the body and good with the arms, and makes a pretty decent swing, and the ball doesn't go straight, that's pretty easy to figure out. He's got to learn to get the club face to get more consistently with the club. But the way you utilize the shaft is the most important part, because the shaft is to your advantage, and the shaft actually makes you do the right thing or the wrong thing. Because the shaft flexing and torquing is where these guys get tremendous amounts of power, and some can create it naturally, some sooner you get that thing aimed at the ball, the better you're gonna go. So we'll try to cover that maybe a little bit. I'm sure Chuck will probably cover a lot of it this afternoon too.
What do you, I mean, you've kind of touched about the modern player versus back when you played. What about differences between LPGA and PGA Tour as far as what do you see swing-wise, short-game-wise, anything difference between the top women pros in the world and the top men pros in the world?
Well, with the exception of Michelle Lee and Lexi Thompson, there's very few girls that are more than 5'6" or 5'8". Some of them are shorter than that. They have flatter swings and more along our style. So their swing comes in a little more level. They learn how to hit up on the ball a little bit more. They don't hit down on the ball. The average tour player actually hits the ball at the bottom of the swinger most of the time, slightly on the downswing. And
Referring to the driver, TrackMan stats.
And the girls drive the ball farther with the according to their percentage of distance versus the swing speed is a little bit more than some of these guys, but these guys are all between on the launch monitor 147 and 150 smash factors, which means that you're getting that ball just about dead flush every time. You're maximizing your power. There's a few guys that probably come really close to 150. But you know, the thing that amazes me about these players today, I mean, the length of the club is longer, the loft of the club is 1 to 1.5 clubs stronger. And my 9-iron used to be 48. Now the 9-iron is 42. That's 1.5 clubs. Some of the guys on the tour use 44. They use a little bit weaker. But the players today hit the ball much higher than we ever did. I mean, part of that is the ball. Part of that was the wood club versus metal club. It's pretty hard to gauge a COR on a wood club. I don't know how you could really do it. You really can't get but you know, the spin rates on in my time, you were really good if you had a low 3,000. Your low 2,000s now, you're where you're supposed to be. Tiger Woods is like 21, 22. Yeah, but when Nicklaus played in his prime, he hit the ball high. So going downwind, he and I would drive, or say he and Palmer would drive with Palmer. Palmer hit it low. He hit a low kind of upright like this with a lot of spin on Jack, hit it right up there. 50 yards downwind every time. Into the wind, I can outdrive it. Because I hit the ball over, and less underspin on the ball, and I could make the ball roll where his ball was all carried. But nowadays, nobody even thinks about that. They just ball it straight up in the air. They just hit it straight up in the air. And I don't know. My swing speed was about 117. And my average carry with the driver was about 148 to 155. or 248 to 255. Now a guy with a 117 swing will carry the ball, the ball speed will be about 168 or 170. Ball in the ball will carry 275, 280.
300.
Well, I couldn't do that if I was at the top of the Grand Canyon heading down.
Why don't we start some questions from the audience?
What's your feeling on, from a club design standpoint, do you think that clubs should be heavier, lighter? I mean, D1, D2 standard, for forever. Do you think we should be changing that to increase club head speed? And how do you see that?
Well, the most bizarre clubs that ever came out was the featherweight. They're getting closer to the featherweight now. When you make a club a half inch lighter, you have to make the head of the club 6.5 to 7 grams lighter. So you don't have as much mass in the head. So swing weight means really nothing. I can make you a driver that weighs 16 ounces, and I can make you a driver that swings 11 ounces, and they both have the same swing weight.
But what would you think is the dynamic? In other words, what do you think is the maxing out of this? Do you think we should go with mass, or do you think we should go with lighter so that the swing speed increases?
The thing that you should go with is what is consistent. What makes you consistent? In other words, I could have a club that there's a lot of people that swing these lighter clubs, and they can go faster, but they're not consistent. They can't hit the ball consistently. They don't have consistent control of the ball. When Chuck and I were first starting with Ralph Mann, we did this thing where we did this testing, and I built 5 irons. I built a 5 iron that was D4 X100 tipped an inch. I built one the D2 X100. I did C9 with a S1 of the weakest S shaft, and I did a C7 with the R shaft. When I got on the machine, I swung each one of those exactly the same. And I made a club that swung D3 with an R shaft, and I was my swing speed wasn't consistent, but I had no consistency in the timing and the ball. So the whole thing is to get that thing to back. One of the things that I keep saying is that I don't necessarily, Carson Solheim says you should always play with the stiffest shaft. Paul White always told Chuck and I that we should always play with basically the stiffest shaft that we could. At one time I was playing with the rocket shaft, the X shaft that was tipped 1 inch and 3/4. It flexed out 9.3 on the machine. So, 7.5 is about as heavy as anybody goes now. So that, but I had to have some weight in order to make that shaft function. It's how the shaft functions. The speed of your swing, the weight of the club on the end, and how all those have to relate together to get the proper flex on. So you're utilizing the shaft. You're better little bit, those people are a little bit swing too stiff a shaft. Simply because they're trying to hit a swing weight, and the heads are lighter in mass. The driver now is less than 200 grams. And that's not very much. The total glove weighs 10 3/4 ounces. But they got a new shaft that's coming out that's 30 grams. If you want to buy one, it's $1,500. I don't think I want to buy one. But, you know, when we were involved with Aldo when the flood first started, and, you know, he just built them on a manual. Well, when we built those sheds, the swing weight was 10 points different because of the design and the balance point of the shaft. So that's a big thing, but those people don't get enough bend where they should in the shaft, so most people are swinging too stiff a shaft. And if you go lighter, you got to go with a softer shaft. That's all there is to it. You know, Bridgestone says 105 miles an hour. Well, I would have to wager a fair amount of money that the average person does not swing at 105 miles an hour. They're more in that 80, 85 to 95 category. So, you know, they need to go a little lower, which I think Callaway has done, and now somebody else has come out with this new softball. So the ball reaction, now they need to get the clubs to react to it too. But swing weight is really non-existent. It's the overall weight that really makes a difference. If I played once a month, I wouldn't want to be going out there with a heavy club. If I played every day, I could play with a much heavier club because I'm used to it, I'm stronger. So a lot of it has to do with strength too. But you know, working with the swing weight is really not the way to do it.
Next question.
You talked about that when you were playing and all the players would hit shots. Nowadays there's so much emphasis on fitness and strength. What's your opinion on the transgression or the advancement of the game and where it's going now?
Well, there's really no substitute for length. That doesn't mean that it's Zach Johnson or like the boy that got the playoff with McGirt on Sunday. They're not long hitters. If you manage your game and play according to your rules, and don't let, you know, the big part of it is you know, I don't know very many players that don't want to think that they're long. So that's one of the selling points of having the longer shaft with the driver, the lighter club, because they think you can swing harder, swing faster, the ball's going to go farther. And you might go farther 1 out of 10. But these guys, you know, it's a big deal to hit the ball 325 yards and have a wedge out of the rough that hit it 275 and hit a 7 iron out of the fairway. You're going to be better even out of the rough most of the time. You know, you're not going to get in too much trouble. So when you do hit the fairway, you got a big advantage on the par 5. I mean, Dustin Johnson has no par 5s. Jason Day has no par fives. You know, it's like Nicholas when he used to play, the par was 69 every day. Maybe one par five was, well, I mean, 530 yards used to be a long par five, now it's a par four. But the biggest thing that I don't think is the distance with the driver, I think it's the distance with the irons. I mean, Phil Mickelson's using an 8-iron for 180 or 90 yards. That's ridiculous. So, then I don't know whether I answered your question or not.
Another question?
You have to do what the manufacturer is telling you, though. That's the bad part of that. You know, I really think that club fitting is not to the point where it should be. I think they should not have a bunch of standardized heads. I think they should have a lot of different weight heads and different shaft heads to see which one you can get to repeat and be consistent with it.
Weighted heads to go with the different weighted shafts that they come with the carts instead of all the same weighted heads with different weighted shafts.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And Glenn.
Bill, how much has your philosophy on swinging the golf club changed since you're teaching?
What?
So you've been teaching for quite a few years now. I know I used to, you know, when I was young and watched you play a lot, caddy for it, but you had certain thoughts on how you swing the golf club in those days, and how much has that changed since you're playing with these, since you've been teaching?
Well, my understanding, you know, how we swung in our day versus today.
Or your teaching philosophy to go with that.
How much has your teaching changed?
How much your teaching changed?
Well, I hope it changes every day. You know, I hope I can add something every day. If I can learn something every day, then I had a successful day. You know, most of my teaching philosophy has changed in the verbal end of it. You know, communication, getting people to, you know, to do that, trying to do. The one thing that I've had a lot of fun going up to TPI, and the reason that I've enjoyed that is because I've taken some players that I can't get to do something. You know, I tried everything in the world. They go up there and they break him down physically. They find out that he's limited in certain motions and various things like that. And by going through that and working on it, they've now been able to do it. And that's a big thing. So the physical condition is that's one of the major changes in the game. And the other basic, you know, my philosophy is still the same. One word sums up the whole thing: balance. And as far as if I knew what I do today when I was playing, I think that I would have been probably 8 or 10% better. You know, about, you know, how to make the swing, you know, how to function. Basically, the only thing that Paul Rennie never told me about my full game is that sometimes I would, at the top of the backswing, I would hang the club a little bit too much down, or the face would be too open, and I'd have to, you know, slap it. Players today don't slap the ball like that. They're not as handsy. more all you know, all together. Sequentially, they're together. And they keep the face a lot more stationary. They don't fluctuate the station, the face as much. You see me up here with Jeff go. You know, Jeff has a tendency to manipulate the face at the ball. And he had a really good week this last week, and he's finally grasping that you know how he's learning how to keep the face more stable and less face movement, less rotation, less face movement, deflection. You know, hitting the ball in the middle of the glove instead of hitting it in the heel and having it deflect to the left or to the right. So his dispersion is far better now. And part of that is making his swing function in the correct track. All those are things that I think there's a progression in teaching. When Chuck and I used to do schools down in Austin, you know, I still believe strongly that you got to teach people a swing, that have the swing go inside out to where the ball's supposed to go. So you learn how to compress it, how to get the strongest ball flight. But if you learn how to hook it, then you could take it and make it go straighter. Although, you know, one of the very best players in the game has never hit a practice ball in his life was Bruce Litsky. You know, he is fake. When I first played with him, I played with him at Phoenix, and he sliced the 9-iron 20 yards. That's hard to do. He learned how to hit it a little straighter. And he never had to hit a practice ball. His swing was always on that, on that track. Where he didn't ever have a two-way miss. I think that's what these guys play against now.
All right, let's take a quick break for bathrooms in here. There's only one at the driving range, so that's probably not the best place to go if a bunch of you have to go to the bathroom. There's a couple bathrooms here. We can walk out this door, walk along this path up to the driving range. We've got 2 little chipping greens up there. We'll go spend some time up there for 45 minutes or so, and then we'll come back, have some lunch. So let's do it.
Nice to see you, sir. All right, how are you?
Good to see you.